Hello and welcome. I'm Mr. B, and this is the first lesson of Art 101. Today I'm going to take you step by step through the process of making your own sketchbook that you can use throughout this series as you strive to improve your art skills.
Let's pause right here for a second. Now guys, this method of making a book is pretty complicated, but it's my go-to for making sketchbooks. So stick with it and I know that you can be successful.
Let's get started. The materials you're going to need for this project are paper, of course, a knife or scissors, needles, string, a ruler, cardboard, and of course a pen or a pencil. First thing we're going to do is take our paper one sheet at a time and fold it in half to make leaflets. Bring the corners together and line them up by touch with your fingers. Carefully place the sheet on the table, and while pressing down with your forefinger, bring your thumbs to the middle, slide down, and crease the fold all the way to the edge. The more care you take in this step, the cleaner the final product will be. I'm using Copier paper, but you can use a pad of sketch paper or really any kind or size of paper that you want. The steps will be the same. Once you have 4 to 6 leaflets, you can combine those into a signature or gathering. Start by opening one leaflet and placing a second one inside of it. Open that one and repeat the process until you have a completed signature. Keep going until you have made as many signatures as you'd like. I'm making 7 for my book. For the kind of stitching I'm showing you, you'll need at least 3. For the signatures themselves, I recommend using at least 4 leaflets per signature, but no more than 8. This depends on the weight of your paper, of course, so you'll have to decide depending on what you're using. Next, we're going to lay out the position of our sewing stations. Get your ruler and place the 0 mark against the edge of your first signature along the spine. Measure in 1/2 inch and make a mark. Then do the same on the other side, 1/2 inch from the edge. We're going to take the remaining distance and divide it into at least 2 more stations. I'm making mine symmetrical through the center because that's my preference, but you can place as little or as many as you want anywhere between these 2 points we just made. Just remember, for every dot you make, you'll have to make a stitch later. For my book, I made 7, which is odd because I have 7 kids in my family, and I made 7 signatures and 7 stations. If you pay attention, you'll find yourself in your artwork. Once we have our first signature laid out, we need to transfer those locations to our other signatures. I'm eyeballing it, but try and make these lines as square as possible. You're next going to pre-drill the holes with a needle or knife. I bought a pack of yarn darners with a variety of sizes, and for this step I'm using the largest one. Lay your signature open and flat on the table, making sure that the center folds of each leaflet are still lined up. Then poke your needle through each sewing station. It's helpful to have something for the needle to go into, but it's not necessary. If you do it properly, the holes on the inside of your signature should fall right on the centerfold. Now that our signatures are properly prepped and punctured, we can call it a text block. But before we move on to the next step, we should mark the orientation of our text block, especially if you choose to mark an asymmetrical pattern. Put all your signatures together so that all the sewing stations are lined up properly, and then mark one of the ends with a pencil. Let's make a cover. I'm using a cereal box for this, but you can use anything really. I once made a book cover out of tree bark. Whatever you choose, take one of your signatures and trace the outline onto your cover material. I'm using a pen so it shows up on camera. Also, mark the locations of your sewing stations. Now, this next step is optional. I want a bit of a lip on my cover, so I'm going to measure out a border that is 1/2 inch away. You should probably do less. You'll see why later. Don't change the edge that will attach to the spine, but I'll go over it once to make it more visible. Now on the spine side, I'm making a reference line 1/2 inch from the edge. We're going to be making sewing stations in the cover, but you can place them any distance from the spine as long as they are in line with the sewing stations of the text block and at least 1/2 inch from the edge. I don't have a square handy, so I'm going to use a piece of paper to transfer the sewing station locations into the field of the cover at a perfect 90-degree angle.
I'm doing mine in kind of a roller coaster wave, but you can place yours wherever you'd like.
Cut that out and make another one for the back cover. I'm using my X-Acto knife to make the holes for this one. It's easy enough to do this with a needle, but a knife gives a cleaner finish. Place the tip of the knife on the dot you made and rotate it between your thumb and your first 2 fingers. Make sure you get full rotation so it makes an even circle. Gently press down as you twist like you're trying to start a fire with it. Make sure you have something under the cover that doesn't have nerve endings. Now that we have all the pieces together, I'm not liking how that 1/8 overhang looks, so I'm going to cut it in half real quick. That's better. Okay, now we need to measure out how much string we need. Measure 1 spine length for every signature, 2 more for the covers, and then an extra 25%. So in my case, I already had 9, so I added roughly 3 more lengths, but I didn't measure it. For the type of string, I'm using waxed linen, but you can use anything you have. The only thing is, the thinner it is, the easier it is to cut through the paper with the string, and if it's too thick, it's just more difficult to sew with. If you're using thread, I recommend doubling it up. After your needle is threaded, we are going to start by grabbing our first signature and our top cover. Push the needle from the inside of your signature through your first sewing station. Pull the string almost all the way to the end until you have about 4 inches left over. Next, go down through the first sewing station of the cover and back out between the cover and the signature. Make a loop around your first stitch. After this, you should have a loop with a string through it. Keep that loop. Go back up through the same hole in the cover, being careful not to stick your needle through the string. Now send your needle through the loop. Pull all the string through and go back into the sewing station in the signature. Now you have a loop with 2 strings going through it and 2 strings on the inside of your signature. Now we'll go back and follow the same steps to tighten everything up. First, we came out of the signature and down through the cover. So if you pull on the right side of the loop, it will tighten that up nicely. Then we made the loop and back up through the cover. So pull on the string coming out of the cover that is not tight yet to tighten the loop. Be careful here because you don't want to make the loop too tight. Finally, pull on the string that is inside the signature to tighten the last piece. Maravilla! Now we are inside the book and we are going to sewing station number 2. Come out of the signature and pull it firm but not too tight. This is where you can easily rip through the pages. Next, go down through the cover. Then go between the cover and the signature on the right side of the stitch. Come back around to the left side to make the loop. Go back up through the cover, but don't close that loop yet. Then go through the loop and then back inside the signature. For these first few steps, we are sewing right to left. So the stitches should also go right to left, so they are easy to keep track of when you're tightening. The loop should be right to left, and the 2 strings that go through the loop should be laying right to left. Finish up the rest of the sewing stations for the cover until you get to the last one. When you get to this point, we are going to go through the loop like before, but instead of going back into the sewing station, we are going to grab our second signature and go into that one instead. This is where those registration marks come into play. Make sure everything is staying lined up the way it should be. Once you have that tight, we can go on to the second sewing station of the second signature. Now it's flipped. We are sewing left to right, so your stitches should go left to right. Focus, focus, focus. There we go. Okay, now we're going to make a loop around the stitching above it. Put your needle between the cover and signature 1 and then back out the other side. Pull all that string through and try not to get snagged on anything. Pull it tight and go back through the sewing station 2. The tricky part of this step is getting the right tension. If you pull too hard, your string will rip through the paper and your spine will be a mess. If you don't pull hard enough, your whole book will be floppy and sloppy. I like mine a smidgen too tight. Repeat that all the way to the end. Here's that same step from a different point of view. By the way, this style of bookbinding is called the coptic stitch, and I prefer it for sketchbooks because when you open a book like this, it lays completely flat even with a hard cover. The last station is the same as before. Make your loop, but instead of going back in the same hole, grab another signature and go into that one. Then for sewing station 2, you're going to loop around the stitch directly above it. Don't go all the way up to the cover, just to the next signature up. Keep on looping until you get to the last signature. We have to do the last signature and the back cover at the same time. Grab both, line them up, and we're going to start by going through the cover, much like in the beginning. Make a loop and go back through the cover. Then go through the loop and into the station of the last signature. That one is easy, just like before. The second one you will start by looping around the signature above it, then make a loop through the cover. Go through the cover loop and through the second sewing station of the last signature. So let's go over that path again. Out around the stitching, through the cover, loop up through the cover, through the loop, and then through the signature. Pull everything tight. Repeat that a couple more times and you're done. With the remaining string at the end, slide it under the stitching and tie a simple knot. My string has wax so the knot holds well, but you can make a few knots if you'd like to make it more secure. Do the same thing to the beginning piece that we left hanging. We're all done sewing. Whew! And look, it lays perfectly flat. This is what I meant when I said I like it a little too tight. The tighter you make your stitches, the more the spine will pull itself open. Now it's time to decorate the cover. Be creative and have fun with it. Well guys, I hope you had fun making this. I know I did. We're going to be learning the elements and principles of design. So we'll all see you next week and we'll keep learning together.